Hi, Sally Bartolomei, white chick.
And I'm Dee Gardner, black chick.
Dee is going to tell us a little bit about what code switching means, why it's important for people of color to code switch, and we're going to have a dialogue about it.
So at home, everybody's speaking Ebonics, and then at work, everybody's speaking what we call standard English.
Right.
And so I've got to know how to speak both. So if I'm applying for a job, most people, there's tons of research that shows people want to hire people that look like them, or people.
So if you're applying for a job with someone who's interviewing you who's white,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
If
you're applying for a job with someone who's of color, do you code switch?
Well, because of implicit racism, it's everybody. If I'm applying for a job, there's a particular way that this society says that I need to present myself. There are rules and guidelines. So regardless of who's interviewing me, for the most part, if that person is a code switcher, they do expect me to be a code switcher.
Okay, that's interesting.
Black, white,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah.
If it's a black person and they do it, they are expecting for me to talk to them.
So is it possible, I know I just interrupted you, but my mind is going
That's okay.
now. Is it possible that there even, if I'm a woman of color interviewing you, a woman of color, there's a part of me, consciously or unconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
who's even tracking whether or not you can code
Mm-hmm.
switch?
Yes.
Is that a conscious thing or is that an unconscious thing?
It could be conscious or unconscious.
Okay, but they want to know, I want to know as a woman of color that you as a woman of color can go out into a world
Mhm.
that isn't just people of color
Right.
and be able to fit in and assimilate.
Right. If it's an interview,
Mm-hmm.
chances are it's conscious, because during an interview, we're evaluating, we're assessing how the person presents themselves.
The interviewer.
Yes, and the interviewer wants to know that the person is going to deliver a product.
Yeah.
They're going to deliver the product in the method, in the way that they want, that they need to.
Okay, so I want to ask you something.
Okay.
Because I have been interviewed
Mm-hmm.
by a man of color, and I have worked in an all-black
Mm-hmm.
agency. I was the only white woman. I was the only white person.
Mm-hmm.
So in that situation, not being the dominant culture,
Mm-hmm.
doing the interviewing,
Mm-hmm.
what was he looking? I did get hired. I had I just touched your breast.
Edit out. Back up, delete.
I did get hired, but he wasn't looking for me to code switch like a white interviewer would for a black interviewee. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
He already knew. Even though you were in that setting where physically you felt like you were a minority,
Right.
we're all in this larger society.
Right.
And in the workplace, particularly in a professional workplace, standard English is what's expected.
And as I'm thinking back on
Okay.
this, he wanted a white woman to go into predominantly white environments. We were selling things. And I remember my friend who was training me. He was an African man. And he was training me, and I was going into these school environments, and I was making sales and making lots of money. And I remember he said to me, I said, why don't you go in there and do that? You could be making a lot of money here. And he said, Sally, those white people aren't going to give a black man their money.
Yeah.
And I have such a naive part of me, like, really?
That's the reality. And well, that's the thing. as a dominant society, as a white woman, as a white man, there are certain thoughts that don't even cross your mind. They are not even on the radar, nor do they need to be for you to survive.
Right.
For me to survive, for a black woman to survive, for an African American man to survive, it's got to be on our radar. It's the lens that we look through. It's if I walk into a store, if I'm in a certain area of town, I'm thinking a certain way. You know, if you walk into a store, that's the thing with the implicit bias, the unconsciousness of microaggressions. If you walk into a store in a nicer, more affluent area, a convenience store, you're going to think or feel a certain way. If you're in an African American, predominantly black area, you're going to think or feel a certain way, and that will be conscious.
Right.
So it's just in the fabric of our society. It's in our psyche, because there are things that you don't even have to consider that we have to.
Right. Thank you. It's interesting, isn't it? Well, is there anything else you want to say about code switching? Yeah. This is organic for us, and we're really trusting ourselves and trusting our communication, and just trusting that this is being inspired. We've actually called in the spirit of Dr. King to inspire us today. So
the ability to code switch and can decide whether we live or die.
Right.
Not only does it decide our success for the majority of us, it will decide whether we live or die. For example, it's not uncommon, we see it all the time on the news, especially in the African American community. We talk about it a lot. You have the guy that's living in an affluent neighborhood, and he's walking up to his house, and he's thrown on the ground by police because someone called the police, and he has to be able to code switch quickly to be able to communicate to them in a way that they are persuaded to believe him, at least give him a chance to show his wallet and his ID. Otherwise, he could end up dead walking up to his own house. Although he says, "This is my house," he needs to be able to communicate it quickly.
Yeah, I remember something a few years ago where there was a professor, I believe, from Harvard, and he was an African American man, and that very thing happened to him in an affluent neighborhood in Cambridge or Boston. Yeah. Do you remember that?
I hear it all the time. It's not just an isolated incident. It's very common. We talk about it a lot. We tend to know someone not far away where that happened. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Conclude video number 2 on code switching. Sally Bartolomei, white chick.
Dee Gardner, black chick.
We want to remind you to like, subscribe, and check out the practices that we have.
And be sure to comment below. We want your real, authentic feedback.